Hi, and welcome to another edition of Beer for Breakfast ABV. I am Danielle. I do mornings here at 91X on the brand new Moog Show. And as always, I've got my beer partner in crime with me, Paul Segura from Karl Strauss. And today, Paul and I are welcoming Rachel and Steve, the co-founders from Kilowatt Brewing. How's it going, guys?
Good.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Good to see you guys.
Yeah.
Right on. Thanks for having us.
Welcome to Beer for Breakfast. It's
We're actually going to start right in drinking beer for breakfast.
Well, you know.
I like how you do it.
I'm so thirsty.
Burrito.
So, Kilowatt, you guys are coming up on your 3rd anniversary, right?
We are.
So that's super exciting. Congratulations.
Pretty awesome.
Thank you.
In a city full of great breweries to flourish like you guys have is pretty cool.
You know, we're a real small brewery. We started off as a 3-barrel brewery and just recently upgraded our system to 7-barrel with some 15-barrel fermenters. So still really small, but we're working our way up organically, just funding it with the growth of sales and not bringing any big investors in or anything like that. We're just kind of working hard and doing it ourselves, you know?
That's
our
awesome.
Brewery's located in Kearney Mesa, celebrating 3 years there, and then we recently celebrated our 1-year anniversary for our Ocean Beach tasting room last month.
Oh, well, cheers
That's
to
a cool
that.
spot. I've been there.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you.
So what are we drinking now?
So this is our Kilowatt Pale, our namesake pale. It's a San Diego style pale ale, 5.6 ABV with Mosaic, Citra, Centennial, and Kwh hops. So very tropical.
Kwh, that's one we haven't had yet.
Tropical, fruity, West Coast pale.
Get a lot of interesting malt character from this. It's kind of like an older school pale ale, right?
Yeah, it's got a little bit of honey malt in it, some Crystal 15, and then as well as some wheat malt as well.
Yeah. Crystal 15, that's probably what's giving it that golden color that we're seeing here.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
The thing that I like about this beer, sometimes I try a pale ale and I'm like, well, by anybody else's standards, this would be an IPA, but it's a pale ale here. This legitimately tastes like a pale ale, you know, not a San Diego pale ale, if you will.
Yeah, you know, one of the things when we were designing this beer, we were working with our head brewer, Brian Cressley. It's his recipe, but when we were looking at it, we were thinking, you know, there just isn't a lot of pale choices right now in San Diego. Yeah, IPA everywhere. Just not a ton of pale choices. So we wanted to come up with something that was drinkable, not too hoppy, but also San Diego style, and a little bit of extra malt character you picked out perfectly, just to get that into the marketplace, because we just don't see a lot of it right now.
I agree, and I applaud you for that. And the reason I said it was old school was because usually pale ales, like back in the day, weren't actually pale. They were golden colored, you know?
Right.
Maybe slightly bronzy, and so this was kind of, you know.
So where does that name come from then? If like the old school pale ales weren't pale, they were kind of more golden. Where does
kind of
that
the English term, right? So usually the beers then were bitters and ESBs and those kind of beers, porters, stouts. So for them, this was very pale compared to some of those beers.
Okay.
Correct.
And the style itself runs a really large spectrum of SRM, so color of beer can be very light to somewhat dark. Yeah.
So is a pale ale, is that an older style than the lager is? Do we know?
Well, a lager, they're different regions. They started in different regions. So, you know, lagers in cold areas, obviously it ferments at a lower temperature. Ales ferment at a higher temperature. So as far as age, a lot of these beers were being brewed for the first time in different areas by different brewers separately, but simultaneously. So.
Oh, interesting.
Agreed. And I think the lagers were sort of a German thing and the ales were kind of a English thing.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Although there are some some German ale styles.
The history. So speaking of history, how did you both get into beer and brewing and opening Kilowatt? What's the story?
So we started off, we actually have a small little cabin. I mean, it's literally like almost a shed that we built on some really inexpensive land up near Lake Arrowhead.
I call it the Shabin.
We call it the Shabin. Yeah, it's just, really small. But our neighbor up there was a home brewer, and Chris Calva, and he's also one of our co-founders as well. And he just made great beer. I mean, just excellent homebrew beer. And so we're like, we can't just keep this in your basement on tap. We got to do something with this. And with the craft beer boom at the, heading into the height of the gold rush, 5 years ago, we're like, yeah, this is a good business model. Let's do this. Spend a couple years saving up our money and put together the business plan and then executed it and started off. Literally, this is true, we actually had a 10-gallon system for the first couple months, and then we went to a 3-barrel.
Wow.
So started really, really small, and just been growing it from there.
Every great brewery out there started out kind of the same way, right?
I mean, Ballast Point, 2-barrel, right? So.
Well, I mean, not just them. Samuel Adams started out as, Jim Cook in his kitchen, you know.
Sierra in their garage,
Right, with just like $3,000 in personal loans for friends and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Right.
That's amazing.
It's really in your heart and the heart of the consumers, and, it's kind of cool to see guys like you grow organically as you get more love from the market. And
yeah, it makes you feel really good when you're expanding just based on, your customers, really.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and then your guys' concept, like your tasting room, it's so funky. And I love it. And even like this, as I try to not be distracted by this, as we talk, this thing moves. So I'm incredibly distracted. Where did the concept come from?
Yeah.
So I've done lighting in the past. I've done a number of bars and restaurants, just specialty crazy lighting and artistic installations, and it's a hobby of mine, And
what a cool hobby!
It's fun. We're actually it's funny because Friday we're going to a bar in San Francisco in the Lower Haight called Knock Knock, a bar that I did the lighting in years ago, and we're gonna go in. It's just for fun, but we're gonna go in and retouch some things, and I just love it. But we brought that concept to both of our tasting rooms in Kearney Mesa and in Ocean Beach. And it's not just, obviously I have a love of lighting, we have a love of lighting, but we've brought in a lot of other artists to collaborate with too. So we've got people from all over the country, but we try to keep things as local as possible. But we've got people that built all kinds of crazy things, and we kind of rotate in art and games and lighting, and so it's fun. It keeps it fresh.
Well, I remember the first time that I went into Kilowatt in Kearney Mesa, and I just kind of stumbled upon it. I was with friends, we had been at Society, and we kind of wanted to stay in the general area. So we look it up and we see Kilowatt, and we're like, we haven't heard of this brewery. This is about 2 years ago. And so we go in, and I just remember walking in and being like, this place is so neat. And the hops lights, that got me, and I was just like, I want one of those. Those are so neat. So your concept alone is just super awesome. If you haven't been in the tasting room yet, go in there because it's really cool. I haven't been to OB. How is OB different from Kearney Mesa?
OB is quite a bit different from Kearney Mesa. Kearney Mesa has great art. We've got artists that show their artwork on a rotating basis, and of course the unique lighting. It's all interactive, so the lighting can change. We can change the color based on the mood or the event, holiday. But OB, we took it. We felt that we could take it a lot farther because of the community in OB. We really felt our theme was very at home at OB, so we really collaborated with a lot of the local artists to create the murals on the side of the building, to come in, and the whole back part of the space is a blacklight lounge, and it's curated by a group of artists called the Ancient Gallery. So it's really our idea with all of our tasting rooms is always to really collaborate and let the community have the space to express their own thoughts and their own perspectives and really create art.
That's
along with
neat.
us creating beer.
Do you see people come in to purposely trip in there?
I have seen that.
I mean, I don't know. I'm just saying, if you're facilitating the area.
If they don't come in that way, they're probably going to get that way.
I can't say that I haven't ever seen that happen.
I mean, we do have a beer called Sunset Trip, so I mean, I don't know, but no, yeah, we see people really enjoy it, kids all the way up to adults too, because we have a lot of big interactive games. We have a giant light bright. It's a 6 foot tall.
Wait, what?
It's a 6 foot tall by 5 foot wide light bright with giant pegs, and
that's awesome.
Little kids all the way up to the older folks love that game. It's
My
fun.
mom never let me have a light bright, so now I'm like, she said it was going to burn the house down, but now I really want to go and play this giant light bright. That's so awesome.
Oh, that's funny.
Neat. So we're on to our next beer, and this is the Guava 250 KWH IPA. What's the story behind this beer?
So this is our one of our staple IPAs is the 250 kWh IPA. That actually started with a collaboration brew with Lightning Brewery.
Oh yeah.
And when we were deciding to collaborate, I was trying to think of a catchy name, and so I was Googling how many kilowatt hours are in an average lightning bolt, and there was one website, it's not an exact science, but one website off of NOAA that said it was, about 250. So that's where the name came from. We decided to add guava. We actually add about 200 pounds of guava for the 7-barrel batch,
Holy
conditioned
cow.
for
That's a
about
lot.
5 to 7 days on the guava.
Well, you can totally taste it in the flavor, and you get in the aroma as well. But guava is not like a super assertive fruit flavor, right? It's just probably why you had to use so much
You
of
have to
it.
use a lot. You really do.
Was that in primary fermentation?
Well, actually, on this particular batch, we did a split gig. We did about a third of it in primary, and then the last 2/3 we actually, after fermentation was mostly complete, then we dropped it in, and we crashed it at that point. So we did that because we wanted to leave some of the residual sugars in the beer.
Yeah.
So there's a little extra sweetness in there. It's all natural from the fruit itself, but it gives it more of a natural flavor. So yeah, we did both. We did both.
So
It does have a little residual sweetness.
out of curiosity, if guava is not very assertive, it takes so much to get that flavor. Why am I seeing guava beers?
Yeah.
Because it's a pleasant fruit. I mean,
It's such a good fruit, and it goes very well with IPAs, pale ales.
I also think, just to be honest, I think that some of the suppliers where us brewers get our fruit from, it was harder to get in the past, or it was more expensive. And it seems that it's more readily available and it's a little less expensive now than it had been. And that obviously it's a commodity, so the price can change and availability can change. But right now it's available, so we're using it. We're using it as much as we can because we really like the fruit.
The interesting thing about this beer, and it could be from the guava, I don't get any of that bitterness left over at the end. And this coming in at a 7.4, I could see this being quite the sniper beer.
Yeah.
Being, you're just it tastes delicious, and it keep going, then you're like, oh no, I'm 3 in and I didn't even realize, because it tastes so good. I would almost say that this is one of those gateway beers that we talk about.
I think it's totally approachable. It's very pedestrian. Anybody can take a sip of this and like it. People from, the beginner to the advanced, all the way through. To me, it's got the right balance. It's got a little bit of residual sugar there, but the fruit also lends a tartness that's there. Mm-hmm. So every sip kind of leaves you wanting another one, and then another one.
Yeah, I think the fruit kind of balances out the hops, especially if you're not a hop head. So I think it is, as you said, kind of a gateway IPA for those.
Yeah, I think of someone like my mom, for instance. So she's just now starting to get into craft beer. I finally got her away from big Mexican lagers. I finally got her showing her other stuff, and one of her favorite beers is Karl Strauss Red Trolley, which is not super assertive beer. But then I'll give her but she'll have an IPA and she'll be like, no, that's too much. But some of these fruited IPAs, she's like, I can actually have that because I don't have that super bitter beer face that you get that palate after a while to enjoy IPAs. So I applaud you for this. This is delicious.
And it doesn't taste like 7%, right?
No.
It tastes like 4.5 or 5 or something. It's easy drinking.
Get on a hot
So you
summer
guys
day.
crushing a lot of
Good to
this.
hear. Yeah.
Yeah, out in OB when it's warm. I like that patio. That's just kind of cool to people watch right there.
It is
So
fun.
where exactly in OB are you guys located?
So we're on Cable Street right off of Newport. So there's a tire shop on the corner, and we're a standalone building, so we're kind of hidden a little. We're set off the street just a little bit. Our patios, even with the sidewalk, but the building setbacks are a little bit hidden. But if you're there at night, we've got a round hop sign that juts out over the sidewalk. It's just a hop, like a kind of a psychedelic hop. So if you're on Newport and you look up Cable and you see that kind of trippy hop poking out over the sidewalk, follow it, and you'll find that guava beer on tap.
Makes me think of the pink elephants. Follow the pink elephants. Follow the
The hop is, to beer drinkers what the moth or what the blue light is to moths.
Yes, yes. That's what we're
Must
hoping
go
anyway.
So we were talking about tripping out earlier. You said you have an apricot sunset trip. That is this one, and it's barrel aged at a 5.2%. So what is it barrel aged in?
So this is barrel aged in a Chardonnay barrel.
Oh.
And yeah, it's about 4 months in the barrel. And we hadn't really we've used white wine barrels before, but we actually hadn't used a Chardonnay barrel. And so one thing that was interesting was this is a first run through the barrel. So that we didn't want to keep it in there too long because we didn't want to pick up too much oak flavor. This is a light beer. It's a low ABV light fruit beer. And so we really didn't want to overwhelm it with oak, and we also didn't want to blend this one. We wanted to get as much Chardonnay flavor as we could in the beer. But what we did do is once we got down to, once we felt that the beer was just about ready, we a lot of times we'll blend on our barrel aged beers, but we just dropped a ton of apricot puree.
Awesome.
Right in the barrel, let it sit on there for another probably about 3 weeks, and then pulled it. So you should get a light oak. You get light oak, pretty solid apricot notes, and then the Chardonnay kind of is the backfill on the whole thing.
That's delicious.
I'm getting so much apricot, and then I get that kind of nice little like sparkly, bubbly at the end.
Effervescent goodness.
There's a little, little champagne-y quality to it a little bit, I would say,
Spritzy.
Spritzy.
Although that might not be a word that brewers want to hear. But, so the other thing brewers may not want to hear is, Chardonnays often have that diacetyl, the buttery thing, right? Which is something brewers go to great lengths to avoid.
Absolutely.
I don't get that at all in this.
Yeah.
No.
Really, you get the Chardonnay, you get the apricot, a little bit of oak, none of the butter.
Yeah. I'm really diacetyl sensitive. Everyone has different levels of sensitivity to all the off flavors, but that one in particular, and that one is like it's my nemesis, diacetyl. And I pick up every little hint of it. So if it's in a beer, we're either really it depends on where it is at in the process. Obviously, if it's early on, you can fix it, but most of the time, once you have a finished product and it's in there, it's going down the drain. We won't serve a beer like that. So but yeah, absolutely. It is tough to brew in that type of environment and not get diacetyl.
I bet.
Once again, it's balanced, right? It's not an apricot bomb. You get a blend of all kinds of interesting flavors working in concert with each other. Really nice job on this.
Yeah, thanks.
It's always interesting because we get a lot of, and I'm sure a lot of the tasting rooms in San Diego, because we're known for craft beer, we get a lot of people that come in and like, well, he's a craft beer head, but I really don't, so I'm just gonna stand here. Do you have water? So it always it's
so
a
then
challenge.
You put a taster of
it's a challenge for me. I'm like,
oh.
let me show you some. Let me give you a few options. You don't have to finish them. You don't even have to take more than one sip.
And no peer pressure.
Yeah, and we have a lot of folks, especially
with
the easy drinking beers with kind of the unique flavors. We've got a lot of converts. Yeah.
Actually, it's, if you faked that you didn't know anything about craft beer and just went around to all the breweries and go, I don't know anything about craft beer, dude, you'd get a ton of free beer, man. Wow. Oops.
Has happened from time to time.
About that. Maybe I'll try that.
The interesting thing, at least about this beer, so when I think of barrel-aged beers, if it's not a sour, this just isn't what I think of. And I really, really like it. Just knowing myself, and because I'm somewhat of a judger at times, if I saw, barrel-aged apricot beer, I'm like, no, but this is really, really good. And this is another one of those lessons that, we don't drink with our eyes.
We do
I've heard that somewhere before.
Because we do a lot of clean barrel fermentations, meaning we don't add Brett and pediococcus and all the bugs into the barrel. We're going to be getting into more of that because our head brewer, Brian Cressley, he's been with us about 6 months. He came over from AleSmith. He was their specialty brewer and barrel age program manager. So, he's
and they definitely don't know anything about that over at AleSmith.
Right. They
never done
He's got a terrible pedigree.
He's done one or two.
Exactly. So, so we're going to be doing more of that, but, most of what we do now is really clean clean barrel fermentation. So, you're just getting the barrel characteristics. We've got a bourbon barrel aged stout with, the coffee and the cocoa nibs, and it's clean. We don't add any bugs into it. So that's one of the other differences too.
Well, it's smart. I think you're using, the oak barrels fresh and wet when they can still impart nice flavors like this into the beer.
Right.
And then maybe 3 or 4 generations in is when you can convert them into sour beers and stuff like that.
That's it.
And a lot of times barrel-aged beers are really much higher ABV than this one. This one's
that's the other.
5.6, so it's extremely low compared to. And I think that's also one characteristic that people equate to barrel-aged beers is, it's going to be 10 or 11%, and they don't necessarily either like the high ABV beers or they're not wanting to drink it at that point in time because of driving or for whatever reason.
Right.
So it's really tough to let the beer sit in barrels for a while, isn't it? Do you guys help him decide when it's ready to pull out? You guys do as a team?
We do.
Yeah. What we do off flavor, basically off flavor testing with all of our staff. Not just our brewery staff, but all of our beer tenders. We'll have team meetings and we get an off flavor kit. So we actually test everyone. We go through all the different, we'll do like 12 at a time so we don't get too fatigued, but for all the different beer off flavors that can occur. So everyone tastes them, and then we have a kind of a rating system, how sensitive different staff members are to a certain, like diacetyl. 25% of the population can't even detect it, right?
Yeah.
So we know who can, who can't, and so that way when we're deciding on when a beer is ready, or especially a barrel-aged beer, we know who can detect what. So if we're like, hey, you know what, I get a little bit of this off flavor in there, Sam's the go-to on this, so so that's how we do it. It's definitely a team effort,
Well, I applaud you guys for the staff training like that. I don't see a lot of people who do that, and it pays dividends. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's an awesome thing. In the long run, it's going to help you guys a lot by doing that, having everybody kind of trained up. And sometimes you have a cold or whatever.
Right. Dehydrated or whatever, your palate changes, correct.
And a lot of people don't realize women have better senses of smell and taste than men do. So if we could incorporate them into the tasting.
Well, our brewery
not
is
just having a guys club.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up too, because our brewery is 50% women owned. So it's very important to us. That's why, if you look at it, we don't have like a lot of like concrete and steel in our tasting rooms. It's like a lot of tasting rooms, it's okay, but really masculine, there's gargoyles and whatever, but in our, so we're little
raccoons on bicycles.
Right, that's fine. That's all good. But for us, we want to have our tasting room is a little more rounded.
Awesome. Well, before we get into our last beer, this weekend is your guys' 3rd anniversary. What's going on? What's happening? I know you have a weekend full of events.
Yeah, thank you. So this weekend, 3rd anniversary at our Kearney Mesa location, which is where our brewery is. We've got Friday is our Brettawatt release. So we're actually releasing 4 of our core beers, one of which is the Guava 250 that we've tried here today. And we've bretted them. So a mix of IPAs, Belgians, and sours. So they'll all be released on Friday. Saturday we actually have some barrel releases and then a donut pairing with Nomad Donuts.
Excellent.
Yes.
And their donuts are
phenomenal.
Amazing.
Yes.
Christiane, who's the executive pastry chef, she actually bakes the beer into the donut. I don't know if I always put that in the description, and I'm always wondering, are people really reading that? Because it's so good.
The things that she does is just amazing. I don't know how she comes up with the flavors that she comes up with, and it's like she comes up with an idea and then like pegs it like directly what she was going for.
And she loves our beers because they're a little bit more kind of unique flavors, and so when I drop the beer off to her, about a week ahead of time before each pairing, she's always like, "Oh, great!" It's just like her creative wheels are spinning. It's adorable. And then Sunday we've got Sweet Ride Sunday, where we're encouraging. We've got 2 classic cars that we own at the brewery, one of which is actually a 1961 Morris Minor that was painted by one of our owners, and it's really kind of psychedelic Janis Joplin style paint job, airbrush job. So we're encouraging everybody else. We have a nice big back parking lot to bring their Sweet Ride to get 20% off your tab if you drive your classic cars or sweet ride down to the on Sunday.
I'm gonna park my Ford Fusion right there.
Everyone's got different definition of sweetness.
Just gonna go grab the 91X Sprinter. Don't mind me.
Yeah.
It's pretty sweet.
Awesome. So kind of looking at where craft beer was 3 years ago when you guys were opening up Kilowatt to where it is now, and we've discussed this, like once you pass that 2-year mark, like that's a big one. So
Right.
I mean, basically, like what do you attest to that, and what do we have to look forward into the future from Kilowatt?
Well, when we opened, we were the 99th brewery in San Diego County 3 years ago, and now there's I think about 160.
Yep, I think you're right.
So that's a big increase, and that doesn't consider all the satellite tasting rooms and also craft beer bars that have opened during that period. So I mean, you're really talking about 100 new craft beer centric businesses that have opened in this market in the last 36 months. It's become way more competitive, but yet there's still more craft beer drinkers being created. So the market is definitely softening. Everyone knows that. But at the end of the day, I think what's happened is, we've talked to some of the other tasting rooms. In the industrial spaces, business is down a little bit. But really, the satellite tasting rooms in the neighborhoods and the areas that are walkable, those are the areas that are really flourishing right now. And I think they're going to continue to flourish. And I think it also creates a lot of new, not only just brand awareness for craft beer, but new craft beer drinkers in those areas. So it's great.
Well, the neighborhood thing that you say that I think is huge. I just saw a stat that 90% of Californians live within 10 miles of a brewery or a tasting room, and that's a huge testament for it. And personally, working in a neighborhood tasting room, it's awesome when you get these same locals. You know what I mean?
Yes.
You get your regulars. They're the people who live in the neighborhood. They're the people who care about the neighborhood. And, I'm sure that that's what you guys are definitely getting in OB. And I'm sure in Kearney Mesa also, because you're not in that huge industrial area.
And if they're family friendly and dog friendly, it
Yeah.
just promotes the whole neighborhood.
Yeah,
thing,
the
right?
big games at our Ocean Beach location are parents' dream. They're the parents' dream.
Oh, I bet.
They come in, their kids are playing with the giant light bright or the giant Connect 4, and they're able to sit down, have a conversation, have one eye on the kids. But they come. They always tell us they come because there's just so much to entertain the kids that they're able to just sit back, relax, and talk like have an adult conversation
Right.
while their kids are still entertained.
And I would assume opening up that tasting room, you opened up to a whole new audience, because I mean, we know OB. Nobody gets out of OB. They don't.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
get as
No,
far as
OB bubble,
like maybe Point Loma, but like that's about it. So I'm
True.
sure that
And that's a stretch for them.
right. So I'm sure that they had no idea you guys were even in Kearney Mesa, and that's another thing. You're showing craft beer to a whole new group of people that didn't even know it was around. So.
We go to Lucy's Market and shoot a game of pool, drink a couple beer, or not Lucy's Market, Lucy's Bar. So there's an alternative now that's not dark and
Yeah, we have
full of biker guys and
a
stuff.
group of parents that have newborns, and they recently requested onesies. They're like, we need the Kilowatt onesies.
That's awesome.
We're working on it.
You guys have a lot of great swag, a lot of great hats and gear and stuff. It's attractive. And so, another barrel-aged beer?
Yes, the last beer.
This is our bourbon vanilla oak amber.
See, and this is
And-
what when I think of beers like this is exactly what I'm thinking. And it smells
We haven't
delicious.
cheersed yet.
Oh,
we
right
should
on,
cheers.
yeah.
I feel like
Let's get a clank in there.
I'm just accustomed to cheersing.
Yeah.
I get a ton of cocoa,
Yeah.
and I get some roasted chestnuts.
Yeah, what we do is we have when you get done with your bourbon barrel, you can chip it. So you can dismantle the barrel and chip the barrel. You may or may not add additional bourbon to soak the chips in, but either way, you then let the beer condition on the actual. So it's not in the barrel; it's sitting on actual chips from the barrel. Oh. And then you slice up your vanilla beans, you throw that in there, and we let it sit on there for over a month. And so you get a lot of flavor. So you will get that oak flavor that from the chips, and then you'll also get the bourbon's there, and then the vanilla is definitely on top.
The thing that I like, well, there's two things. Well, there's multiple things I like about this, but two of the things I can think of is, number one, I don't ever see bourbon barrel-aged ambers.
Yeah.
I never see this. I never ever see this. So that's super special. And then I've never seen a bourbon barrel aged beer that is not, this is only 7%. They're usually like up there. It's always like 10, 11, just these huge beers. How did you do that?
Well, because it's not if it's not sitting in the barrel, a lot of times barrel-aged beers are high ABV because of you're avoiding contamination. It's sitting in usually not refrigerated space, and there can be things that grow if it's low ABV. Since this one, and if it's especially barrel-aged for a long time, so this one, since it's just conditioning on oak chips, it's safe. It's not barrel-aged for 9 months. There's not really a chance of the contamination. So much safer to have the lower ABV.
We've got some questions.
Certainly.
Did you chip the barrels yourself, or did you buy them already chipped?
Combination, depending on the batch.
Were they French oak chips?
Yeah, it depends on the batch. They're French oak barrels, so French oak chips.
All right.
Yeah.
And how did you sanitize those? How do you keep those from?
Well,
Potentially
when you're sanitizing the chips, you can use different products, but bourbon itself is usually the best way to do that.
All right.
If you were to you could use other products, but bourbon, it kills everything, and it may impart additional flavors
So you allow
into the beer
the chips
too.
to soak or sponge up the bourbon a little bit?
Technically no, but sometimes
Science.
maybe.
Well, I think
we get rid of all the residual bourbon.
I think it'd be above
but-
reproach if you said yes, but you never know these days, right? You totally get the Madagascar vanilla beans in this. This is a really well-made beer. I love this beer a lot. Maybe too much. I just want to drink the rest of it.
I know. Well,
There is an extra bottle for you.
I love that you get that like bourbony, oaky taste behind it, but no offense to stouts, it's not a stout.
Yeah.
Right.
It's, you know what I mean? And that's the biggest thing about this. This isn't like some big, massive beer that you can only have, maybe an 8-ounce pour of it, and then you're done. Like, you can have multiples of these, and you still get all that flavor behind it.
I think there's a time and a place for every beer out there. But, I think by and large, beers are social beverages. You should be able to drink several when you're hanging out or in a social setting. And this I could drink several of and enjoy the heck out of it.
Yes.
This is really good.
Thank you.
thanks.
Yeah.
And I can maybe see this improving a little bit with age, maybe laying
Is this a bottle
laying
that you
this
could lay down?
I'd lay this down for a year just to see what it would do, maybe 2 years, and I think it would be fun. I think all the flavors would kind of join together a little bit more and round out. And
Yeah, for sure. And we actually haven't done that. This is a beer that when we make it, it's a little time intensive. We've got to do a lot of work on the back end to prepare the basically all the adjuncts that we put in, the wood and the cutting up vanilla and everything. So and then we're turning it around so fast because it sells pretty well. So we haven't really got to do that. So I would be interested to try that too. We should do that.
It is the anniversary this week. Maybe you take some of that, you lay it down.
for the 4th anniversary, you can break out some bottles. That'd be fun.
Good idea.
Awesome. Well, we are here with Kilowatt Brewing. Rachel, Steve, thank you so much for coming on and bringing these
Thank you.
great
Thank you,
beers.
guys. Really appreciate it.
Happy anniversary. This weekend, check out Kilowatt Brewing, Kearney Mesa. They're having their 3rd anniversary. There's stuff going on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Their website, kilowatt.beer. Or you can find, you're on the Facebook, the Twitter, the Instagram, all those things.
All 3, yep.
All 3 of those.
Kilowatt
Awesome.
Beer.
Kilowatt beer.
So find them on social media, follow along, go to their tasting rooms, if nothing else, for just not only the good beer, but all the cool stuff that's in them. It's a ton of fun. And thanks for joining us. As always, you can find more Beer for Breakfast ABVs up at 91x.com, and you can hear Paul and I on Beer for Breakfast every Friday morning with the Moog Show at 8:45. Thanks, and cheers.
Cheers.
All right. Cheers.
Yeah.
Wait, my glass got empty.
Oh, no.